Good morning and welcome to today's mission status briefing. With us today is Derek Hausman, the International Space Station lead flight director, who is just coming off his Orbit 2 shift. Derek?
Good morning, thank you. And it's good to be here today to talk about what is another productive and very busy day on board the Shuttle Endeavour and the International Space Station. As I left the control center, both crews were wrapping up their day with preparations for tomorrow's spacewalk. Of course, we'll be conducting the second spacewalk, EVA2, tomorrow. And the spacewalking crew, which for EVA2 is going to be Drew Feustel and Mike Fincke. We're wrapping up their final preparations, final review of their procedures, gathering of the tools, and eventually they'll be spending the night in the airlock overnight. So we'll button them up in the airlock and then depress it to 10.2 and 10.2 PSI and start what we call overnight campout. But I'll go back and start with the beginning of the day. As you heard yesterday from Leroy Kane, the shuttle program decided to do a focused inspection, which is a procedure that we have a placeholder for on flight day 6, and it's a way to use the orbiter boom sensor system to take a closer look at areas of interest on the orbiter tile. What that involves is using the space station robotic arm to grapple the OBSS and pull it out of the orbiter payload bay, or the cradle along the edge of the payload bay. We then maneuver the OBSS to a handoff position, at which point the shuttle arm grapples the OBSS, station arm backs off, and then the shuttle crew executes a pre-planned series of maneuvers that put the OBSS in the right position so the sensors take a look at the areas that folks wanted to look at. That's all completed. That was done without incident and per procedure. Took on the order of 2 hours of crew time, and that the data and all the imagery collected from that focused inspection is now on the ground in the hands of the imagery team that's going to do the analysis and report back to the MMT. And my expectation is that when Leroy is back to brief you this afternoon, you'll hear more about the results of that focused inspection. In addition, in yesterday's briefing, we talked about an issue that we had yesterday during EVA1 with Greg Shamatov's spacesuit, or his EMU. And the issue was a failed carbon dioxide sensor. When we lose that carbon dioxide sensor, we have rules in place that say that we have to assume a lesser capability, so we had to cut EVA1 a bit short. That, again, as we mentioned yesterday, that suit will not be used on EVAs 2 or 3. So it will be reused on EVA4 when Shamatov goes back outside. But what we did today was perform a dry out procedure in which we blow cool air through the suit and over the sensor in an effort to dry it out. Interestingly enough, when we activated the suit this morning, the sensor had already been recovered. We had a good and nominal reading from the CO2 sensor, which is not completely unexpected, as it's moisture in the sensor that causes the problem, and you would expect once we get the crew out of the suit that moisture would abate and evaporate. But we went ahead with the dry up procedure as planned, and the CO2 sensor looks good, so we're assuming that it's going to be good, and we're going to plan to execute a nominal EVA4. But we do have pre-planned bingo points in all of our EVAs or spacewalks, such that if you have an issue at any point of the EVA, any number of reasons can cause you to come back inside. But we have pre-planned points at which we can back out. We understand the work ahead of us so that we can cleanly and efficiently cut the spacewalk short. And we've got those identified for EVA4. So our plan going in is to just take one final look at those bingos that we defined pre-flight, and then make sure that they make sense now that we've got, once we have EVAs 1 through 3 behind us, and then we'll make the right decision based on what happens during EVA4. We're assuming that the CO2 sensor will work well. But there's a lot of variables in terms of how hard Greg is working, how much he's perspiring, how much other moisture's in the suit, et cetera, et cetera. So we got a good dry out, a good sensor, and we'll plan a nominal EVA4 with an understanding that if we have a repeat of the problem, we understand how to back out of that EVA if we need to. Additionally, yesterday you received a briefing on the plans for us obtaining imagery during the 25 Soyuz undock. We're still continuing working toward that goal. The plans and procedures are coming together. In terms of the status, nothing has changed since yesterday. As a matter of fact, as I left the control center, the 25S crew, Dima, Paolo, and Katie, were reviewing procedures and uplink messages from our Russian colleagues related to that, to the unique aspects of the the imagery during the undock, and there was a plan to have a tag up with the experts in Moscow to talk about those procedures. So that plan is coming together very nicely. We have all the technical aspects nailed down in terms of the station attitude, the attitude timeline, the plan for the Soyuz, and then the plan for the activities of the Soyuz crew inside the spacecraft in order to get the imagery that we want to get. So I'm really impressed with the off-console team that has worked over the past 5 or 6 days to make that story come together. Now they've handed that package off to the real-time team, and we'll start working it as a nominal part of the mission plan. Looking forward to the undock on Monday. As I mentioned, we started preparations for EVA2. When I did the pre-flight briefing, I identified EVA2 as possibly one of the more challenging EVAs, just because we're actuating a number of quick disconnects or QDs related to the ammonia system. These are QDs that have had leaks in the past and have been difficult to manipulate in the past. So there's a real possibility tomorrow that we will have some ammonia leakage as we set up these QDs to do the refill of the leaking photovoltaic thermal control system. We've got the procedures in place such that we will decontaminate the EVA crew once they get inside the airlock. We've got what we call Draeger tubes that will monitor the amount of ammonia in the atmosphere. And so we feel comfortable going forward with the EVA with an understanding that if we do get contaminated with ammonia, which is possible, we understand how to clean the crew up and keep them safe once they come inside. One question that came up yesterday that I didn't have an answer for was the total volume of this photovoltaic or PV-TCS loop that we're filling. The total volume in the system, the volume of ammonia is 55 pounds, and what we plan to transfer or top off the system with is 5 pounds of ammonia from the external thermal control system, which was one of the primary systems on the truss. I think that's all I have for status.
Okay, Derek, thank you very much. We'll take questions now, starting here in Houston. We'll ask you to step up to the mic, please, and please remember to state your name and affiliation. Yeah, this one. Yes, go ahead.
Philip Sloss with NASASpaceflight.com. Can you just talk about progress in terms of your mid-deck transfer status?
Yeah, actually, I got a status this morning from our ACO, who's a flight control position in the shuttle flight control room that manages transfer. And I don't have specific numbers, but he told me this morning that we were well ahead. So mid-deck transfers are all going extremely well. We didn't have a lot of transfer on this flight going in, but we're hours and hours ahead.
Good. Gina?
Gina Sinceri, ABC News. We heard the Pope this morning visit with the crew, and he expressed good wishes for Paolo Nespoli. And what that brought to mind is just in terms of long-duration spaceflight, you'll be dealing a lot with those kind of family issues down the road. So talk to me a little bit about the wealth of knowledge you're gaining on space station for dealing with crews with long-duration spaceflight and their family issues, and how you assemble that for going beyond low Earth orbit someday.
And one of the things, one of the lessons learned that we took forward from our experience with U.S. astronauts on the Mir space station was the importance of connectivity with the folks on the ground, with family members, with mission control. And of course, on the Mir space station, without a network of TDRS satellites, they had very limited communications opportunities with the ground, a few hours a day at best. With the space station, with our network of TDRS satellites, we have quite a bit of coverage. I mean, at any given hour, we have 45 or 50 minutes of communications with the ground. So, anytime, any issue, they can simply make a call to the ground, and they have all the resources available to them that we're ready to provide. In addition to that, we have regularly scheduled personal family conferences or private family conferences, which are video cons with a crew member's family. And we also have what we call the IP phone, which is a phone that they can essentially pick up and dial anybody on the planet for large portions of the day. And it's not continuous, but it's another important resources for the crew just to stay connected with friends and families and relatives. We also have an organization here at JSC whose job it is to basically provide psychological support to the crew. So meet their needs while they're on orbit, the personal needs with friends and family. So I think we actually do a really, really good job, and we've come a long way in terms of family support and psychological support for the long-duration crew members. And that's been pretty consistent feedback that we've gotten when they come home and debrief, is that they felt very connected.
Okay. Any other questions? Robert?
Hi, Rob Perlman with CollectSpace.com. Tonight, soon, the spacewalkers will be camping out for the evening. But then for the third EVA, as I understand it, you're going to be doing this new lightweight exercise pre-breathe. And then if that works, you may do it for the fourth as well. So this potentially could be the last camp out. My question is, how do you determine what works? Is it just waiting to see if for this new procedure, is it just waiting to see if they get the bends, or is there some test that they have to pass? What qualifies this new procedure versus the camp out?
Okay. Now, what you're referring to is the in-suit light exercise, or what, everything's got an acronym, so we refer to it as ISLE, I-S-L-E, or ISLE. And first, I want to make clear that the ISLE protocol has gone through the same rigorous ground testing that the camp out protocol and the exercise pre-breathe protocol has done. So it's been validated with many, many test subjects under many different conditions against the same criteria that the camp out protocol and the exercise pre-breathe protocol were validated against. So it's a medically proven, perfectly sound protocol. So what we're doing on orbit is not a test, but it's the first time we've used the protocol. So that's why we decided to use it on EVA3 by starting with it on EVA1, because anytime you try something different with something as complicated as station can be with the airlock and the computer systems and support systems, we like to go through it carefully and methodically. So there is no larger risk of the bends with the ISLE protocol than there is with any of the other protocols that we've been using. Having said that, that would certainly be a criteria that at the end of EVA3, we would ask the crew for feedback. Did you feel any differently than you did for EVA1 and EVA2? Was there anything that you didn't like about the way the protocol was executed? Were there any surprises with the procedures? So, really, it's a tested protocol. It's a validated protocol. We consider it equivalent to the ones we're using, the ones we'll use tonight, and the ones we've used in the past. But since it's new, we'll have the tag up with the crew and say, did you feel anything different, which we don't expect? And were there any surprises with the procedures? Do we need to change something? Do we need to do something better? Does it make sense to do it on an EVA4?
Okay. Any other questions here in Houston? We have reporters on the phone bridge. We'll go there now. Marcia Dunn?
Yes, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, hear you fine.
Yes, Derek, I was wondering, is there no way to replace the sensor in Greg Chamatov's suit, or even give him a different spacesuit component, so you don't have to worry about this on the fourth spacewalk?
Yeah, generally speaking, it's difficult to do on-orbit maintenance of the spacesuits, just because of the complexity of the suits and the tools and the spare parts required. Ironically enough, we did fly a spare CO2 sensor on this flight. It came up on ULF-6. However, it was looking ahead to a point where we had a procedure in place to do the change-out. So we don't have, the procedure's not done, it's not validated, and we're not ready to do that kind of CO2 sensor change-out on orbit, although looking ahead to a post-shuttle station, at some point we will be able to do that. And we'll have the spares in place and the procedures in place. We just don't have it for this mission. The other challenge we have is that this is an extra large, hard upper torso or hut that Chamatov wears, and we don't have another one of those on board. The third thing, so it's not a simple change out. The third thing I'd point out is that there's no guarantee, even if we did change out the sensor, that we wouldn't have a repeat of this issue. It's all driven by moisture, which in turn is driven by many times how hard the crew is working. So what we think is the best posture at this point is to dry the sensor out as we did today, and then give it a go on EVA4.
Thank you. And I was just wondering if you could talk about your feelings and your team's feelings during the Pope's call. it was a historic moment on both fronts. I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit about that aspect, please.
I thought it was just an amazing event, really a beautiful event. As we set up for the event, we set up the video and checked the video and the sound with the crew. On our monitors in Mission Control, we had a shot of the Vatican and people passing by, and then we had a shot of the Pope getting set up and getting mic'd up, and it was just an amazing, beautiful event. I thought his words were extremely eloquent, and I thought the crew did a great job of addressing his questions. So it was an honor and a privilege to be a part of it.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Bill Harwood?
Yeah, thanks. Derek, a quick question from yesterday. We were told during the undocking briefing that we got that once they've undocked, they cannot redock. I got to thinking about that. I'm just curious, if they really did have a problem resealing the habitation module or something like that, is there no way to come back to station, or is that absolutely forbidden? Thanks.
Well, I'll tell you that a redock is not analyzed, and when I say analyzed, I mean the specifics of the clearances, the loads on the station, the attitude control coming back in. So that is not, it's not an analyzed configuration that we would call a nominal backup plan. In addition, as you heard yesterday, a hatch leak scenario or an inability to close the hatch is considered a very, very remote outcome. If there was a small leak, as you heard yesterday, the expectation is that we would feed that leak and get the crew on the ground. Having said that, in the extremely unlikely scenario that you couldn't get the hatch closed, my expectation is that that Soyuz would station keep for as long as required, a day, maybe 2 days, until we as the two programs got comfortable that it was safe to redock. And my expectation in that scenario is that we would get there. We would get comfortable, and in that unlikely event, we would redock.
Thank you.
Okay, James Dean.
Hi, thank you. James Dean from Florida today. I just had a few questions. First, Eric, you mentioned the potential for ammonia contamination. As I recall, the bake-out procedures and things like that can be pretty time-consuming. I was just wondering if that's built into the EVA timeline, or if you do have to do something like that, is that going to jeopardize getting any of the planned work done?
Now, for better or for worse, we've got a lot of experience with these quick disconnects and the ammonia leakage that often accompanies those operations. So what we do is we build what we call the wet ammonia quick disconnect operations, or the operations that the crew is actually opening and closing the valves and making the connections. We build those. We build the timeline such that those activities with the so-called wet QDs are in the first half or first third of the EVA. So therefore, we get to a point about halfway through the EVA where we're done with ammonia, and then we can take credit in terms of bakeout time in the second half of the EVA. For EVA2, for example, we're doing work on the solar alpha rotary joiner Sarge. So we're getting bakeout credit for that entire time where we're doing other work. So generally speaking, we don't lose content if we get contaminated.
Thanks. Regarding that Sarge work, I was wondering if you could compare it at all to what was done on 126. I was thinking that maybe that was a little bit more arduous because there was some debris that needed to be scraped up and cleaned off that I presume isn't going to be necessary this time.
That's correct.
But how similar are they?
Very similar operations. We don't expect to do, like you said, we don't expect to do the kind of cleanup that was required on previous missions. The lubrication itself is very similar. And as a matter of fact, I mean, this particular, the Port Sarge has been performing very well, and we're a few months ahead of where this preventative maintenance would actually be required. But since we had the opportunity, we're going to go into it, go take care of it now and get it out of the way. But you are correct in that we certainly don't expect and hope we don't find any significant debris or any other contamination on the joint.
Thank you. And lastly, I just have heard some mentions of storm troubleshooting. I'm not familiar with what's going on there, and I just wondered if you could explain that, and is there any potential issues regarding the re-rendezvous and use of storm for that?
No issues. Big picture, no issues with the storm hardware, and no impacts or no changes to the re-rendezvous that we planned for undocking day.
Okay, is that it from you, James?
Yes, thank you.
Any other questions here in Houston? Seeing none, we'll wrap up this briefing. You can follow activities in space, the International Space Station and Endeavour's flight, STS-134, at www.nasa.gov. Thank you for being here.